What's up, guys? Connor OHanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. Tonight, we are live and we are discussing the gun violence epidemic here, specifically in America. We're going to be going over a variety of policy proposals. We're going to be talking about specifically the reaction to the most recent shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that properly, but still, you guys know what I'm talking about. We're going to be talking about the reaction from right-wingers. We're going to be talking about the mainstream media response, and I'll be fielding questions and hopefully addressing comments throughout this as we start to discuss deeper dive takes as to the gun issue specifically in the United States in 2022. With that being said, we're just going to dive right into it. We're going to lay the groundwork for how we got here. I'll give you my take on generalized gun regulation, and then we can go into the specifics of some of these responses and proposals. So, off the bat, for everybody that may not know, most everybody knows what has happened in Texas, but last week, I think it was Tuesday, like early Tuesday, a armed gunman with two AR-15s went into a school where he went and killed 19 students, and I believe he killed his grandmother as well. This is also on the heels of the Buffalo shooting and many, many others that may have happened in between this weekend, frankly, which illustrates the problem that we have here in America, but we will address some of that moving forward. But the groundwork is easily laid by just stating this one case, right? We have a gun problem. It's a gun problem and a mental health problem, which we have seen the goalposts move to the mental health problem specifically. But that doesn't mean that one necessarily outweighs the other. I would think that it does. But to address all of the concerns and issues that we want to in fixing the issue, you have to address it from all the heads of the hydra, right? So it is a gun issue. It is a mental health issue. It is a poverty issue. It is an isolation issue, which ties into the mental health aspect of it. So there's a lot of different pieces here, but we can just start with the generalized. I mean, this is the first time we've talked about the any sort of gun regulation or gun policy on the show, so I'll just tell you where I stand on all this stuff. But especially when I was running for office, you have to have a specific response and a specific plan for how to address guns. And coming from Bucks County, it's not the most rural place. It is not the most urban place. It is a suburb. It's not technically a suburb of Philadelphia, but it is basically a suburb of Philadelphia. And you get this weird mix of everything where you have people that go and use guns for hunting. You have people that go and use guns for leisurely fun. And I think there's a major distinction as to those two things. I think there's a distinction in the people that treat guns like they are a tool and the people that treat guns as they are a toy. I don't think that there is like one monolith thing where people are like, yes, like this is how it really is. People say like, yes, guns are a tool. Well, they are and they aren't. They are in theory, but they're not treated like that by millions and millions of people, which is the sad reality of the situation we're dealing with here. They are a tool if you use it literally just for hunting. Because in every other aspect of life, and I guess you could say in self-defense, but in every other aspect, Sam, the most of the show will be talking about the gun epidemic, but if you have a specific thing you want to talk about, you can feel free to throw it in the chat as usual, and I will get to it intermittently or after or in between clips or whatever we are looking at tonight. So feel free if you have questions or anything that you want to talk about to throw it in the chat. But it is a weird balance to say we have urban America, which is overloaded with guns, rural America, which is overloaded with guns, and suburban America, where most, I would say, of the mass shootings happen. Now, there might be reasoning for that. There might be some sort of explanation. But frankly, if you just look at where a lot of these places are, like that are impacted by these things, it is suburban America, where it's not necessarily just, it's not just poverty that is going to push somebody to commit a crime, and it's not just a mental health issue specifically. It is access to guns. That is the nail on the head, like the where we have to start with addressing the issue. If we can't address that part of it, then we can't address the other pieces of it, or they're not applicable. So the way I look at it is, if you have access to guns in this country, which in a second too, we can discuss the Supreme Court case, but the Second Amendment does give people the right to bear arms. Now, what that means has changed over time. What that means from the founders, and I've had debates with friends and acquaintances about this, but the founders, and it might be obvious to some of you that I'm saying this, but the founding fathers did not have AK-47s or M16s or any of the military grade rifles that they have today. And frankly, if you look at the AR-15, that is the civilian version of an M4 or an M16 that is used in war. And that might be simplifying it quite a bit, but that is not necessary for any civilian to have. It is my opinion. The Second Amendment was interpreted for having an organized militia. And even at that, in modern society, it is pretty ludicrous to try to compare like the aspects of 1776 in a revolution against the British versus today. So it doesn't seem applicable to me in that same way. We can talk about the line, because I frankly think that if you push on certain issues, right? So the same people I would debate on what that line is. Well, the founding fathers didn't say you can't have an automatic weapon, blah, 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 right? Where you push them in this debate, and I would ask that if you have these conversations with friends and family, that you do the same thing for yourself. Ask them, what is the line? What is the line of a weapon that you think is okay for a civilian to have? And again, we will talk about the specifics with the police and all that. But as an individual, do you need a nuclear warhead? Which, obviously no, right? Do you need an armored vehicle or a tank? No. Do you need an RPG? No. Do you need a light machine gun that could be used to maybe take down, or a 50 caliber rifle that could be used to take down a helicopter or an armored vehicle because of the caliber of the round? I would say no. Do you need to have any of these things with that are military grade? Maybe they're less caliber, they're lower caliber than a 50 cal, but are military grade. No, you do not. You don't need the civilian version of these guns. You could maybe maybe argue that some long rifles that are considered semi-automatic could be legal for the specifics of saying hunting, that is your main thing, that is your main source of food. Most people, that is not the case and is a ludicrous thing to say. But, there are exceptions to those rules, right? The way I see it is the line is always arbitrary. The line is always moving. And frankly, I would rather someone have a long rifle, a bolt action rifle used for hunting deer or hunting whatever, pheasants, or a shotgun that's used for that, than someone having a handgun. Because the majority of crime that is committed with guns are committed with handguns, which isn't the same message that we're used to hearing. It isn't the same thing that we're used to addressing, because usually a lot of these mass shootings are committed with a semi-automatic long rifle like the AR-15. So we do really need to figure out where the line is. How do we sell that line? Are we able to adapt it and change it? And how do we get it passed in the Senate and with the Supreme Court? And Eric, I hear your argument in saying that Eric said, I hate the founders argument. It can be weaponized against other rights. Founders didn't have cheap podcasts on YouTube either. There are better arguments. The problem with that is that we're interpreting the Second Amendment, right? So the founders literally wrote the Second Amendment. I mean, I don't know if Alexander Hamilton himself wrote all of the Bill of Rights, but he advocated for the Bill of Rights, right? So if you look at that is how the Supreme Court is supposed to interpret these rulings. Now, pause for a second. I believe that the Constitution is a living and breathing document, not an originalist interpretation. So if we want to fight on that ground, I can make a different argument, and we will. But I'm addressing the first things first, because when you talk about the Second Amendment, people believe, as CB noted in the chat, that some people that are pro-Second Amendment don't necessarily think that there is a line. They don't necessarily think that there is limitations. I will now transition into that case law that we're talking about here, that is interpreted, which was DC versus Heller, which was a Supreme Court case that in 2008 deemed it your personal individual right to have a weapon, to have a firearm as a weapon. Now, the Second Amendment was loosely interpreted throughout all of this time to say, yes, you can have a weapon, but that right is limited. It is not unlimited in that way. The same way, we could argue that the First Amendment is limited. It is not wholly unlimited to say that you have the utmost, complete, unrestricted freedom of speech. Now, we also have to address the fact that guns are specifically made for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to kill. If we cannot address and accept that, and I get it, people that own guns don't necessarily kill people, but the intent and usage in its proper sense of a gun is to kill. So we have to disassociate from other rights only for that reason, because it is a material good, not just a saying, yeah, you can have your own military. You could just do that, right? No, because that's not what it's saying. And in DC versus Heller, it still says that despite the ability to have your own weapon, you can have it regulated and you can have it maybe restricted is not the most, sexy word to describe it, but it's applicable. It is not so easy to say, yes, this is the line and that's how far we're going to go. But I hear you, Eric, and I I only throw out that founders argument for that reason, because the founders are used in the other sense. They're used in the positive of saying they said we can have it, so yes, I can, versus, well, they haven't seen what weapons and what capabilities we have. So that's all I'm saying. Sam asks, how would you respond to someone saying that they keep weapons to protect freedom as referenced in the Second Amendment? I'm sure they would want all of the military weapons you listed. My response would be that you can't, I mean, it's a tricky question, right? Because you're responding to the fringe of the fringe to say that you can't have any restriction on the Second Amendment. To say, to protect freedom, that is a rhetorical trick, right? So if they mean the freedom of having a gun, so I know you said in terms of for the security of the free state part, right? So that, in my opinion, if I was a Supreme Court justice, which I am not, and I'm not a lawyer, but my interpretation of that would be, you can have a weapon, you can have all of this stuff in the form of a well-organized and, quote, and I'm quoting the Second Amendment, regulated militia. So I hear that criticism, I hear how do you address it, and I say freedom in this country and freedom abroad is different. Freedom in this country is, frankly, outlined in the negative sense by the Bill of Rights. At least a lot of our freedoms are outlined in the negative in the Bill of Rights. So it doesn't say unfettered, uninfringible. I mean, I can't even think of like more words, like completely unregulated access to a weapon. And literally until 2008, you did not have that specific right outlined. So in response to it, I would have to kind of hear the specific of like where they're coming from to respond to it. But you have to just like say, all right, well, every freedom, every right comes with some level of restriction, some level of responsibility to take that action and reaction that comes with that right. So there's a give and a take throughout all of that. And I agree that it is, to the point in chat, it is kind of absurd to say necessarily that guns are owned for self-defense. You did the regulated argument. I want you to understand I'm only challenging you in a Socratic method, but you are a Commonwealth man. Take a peek at Article 21 of the PA Constitution. I will pull it up. I'll put it up on the other side of my other screen as we're as we're looking at this. But Eric, I would challenge you to say, where is your line then? If you can't say that we have to have regulation in the Second Amendment, right, then where would your line be? Because what's stopping me from just saying, well, I should just have, for everyone that if you sorry, I got caught reading chat there for a second. Yes, and I did see the new handgun restrictions in Canada. I've seen the restrictions and the mandatory buyback in Canada as well. So I hear that the regulated argument may not sound like, oh, this is the most convincing argument, but the vast majority of Americans are already in support of regulating guns. And that's the bare minimum of saying, like, background checks. And to me, as much as I appreciate, I could pull it up on the other side and we can walk through it, but to me, it's pretty simple. Treat a gun the exact same way that you would treat a car, owning a car and driving a car. License to carry. Registration that identifies the person that holds it. Insurance. And training. Because obviously, insurance is a big part of this, because if you talk about the insurance, you're liable and you have to have the insurance without having insurance, you'd be liable for damages caused by that gun or the irresponsibility of the owner. And if you need to be responsible, you need training. AKA, if you want to get a license, you have to get lessons to drive. You have to have practice driving. You need to go and learn what the car does. Learn how to use the brakes and the gas pedal. And it sounds simple and stupid when you boil it down to that, but you need to be able to do that when you're talking about the specifics of handling a weapon that can be used to kill. If we were talking about anything, like almost anything else that has an alternative usage, that's where you can have all these diverging arguments. It's disheartening to just be like, yeah, like we can just have at it, just anything you want, and anything short of letting me have the most ridiculous, why can't I have a javelin missile, right? Like, the argument is in that gray area. You have to have some level of regulation, and you have to compromise some level of security for freedom, and it goes the other way. And I know that, there's the classic Ben Franklin line, but that's not applicable. If we are to just say, you can just do whatever you want, then obviously you just have massive weapons that are just going to get people in trouble, right? And we're going to have more people dying, etc. And there are other common sense things that you can work on with gun owners that are frankly supported by gun owners. You can talk about magazine size restrictions, which, again, is not necessarily like the end-all be-all. But if we're specifically going to target now mass shootings and school shootings, there's nothing saying that you need a 30-round magazine, right? You just don't. And if you're hunting and it's, you need more than 10 rounds, and I know I'm saying, I'm not saying 10 rounds total, I'm saying 10 rounds in a magazine, you are off the mark. You are being dishonest and you're not being good faith and engaging with the point. Because no one's saying that no guns should exist, and if they are, they're extremely fringe. You do it on a federal level, you're going to run into the 10th Amendment issues. Shall issue, i.e., shall issue states. How do you propose to counter those? I'm not sure if I understand what the shall issue state is, to be frank. Next thing on here is there have been studies that show that something like 8 out of 10 guns used in crimes in Chicago were sold by like 3 gun shops. That's also something that previously has been discussed, is looking at, well, I've been curious as to, I don't know the answer to this, frankly, off the top of my head. It would definitely require some more research. So if I am missing some way of doing this, please let me know. But the way of tracking a weapon where you could just, shave down the, I'm an auditor, right? So when you look at tracing and tracking things, it's, ID numbers, VIN numbers, all these things that can help identify it. There has to be a way that you'd have to make a shop or a manufacturer, and this is a bit controversial in and of itself in saying it, but liable on some level for how that gun is used, where it's sold, and how it is distributed, because otherwise we get these things like the hands into the, quote, bad guy with a gun, right? And I'll just say this too. While we're talking about bad guys and good guys with guns, this past week, that shooting in Texas is a prime example of why the good guy with a gun argument doesn't work. It doesn't hold up. Because if the bad guy with a gun has 2 guns that you are, quote, I'm quoting the police here. So we're not talking about like just an armed civilian. If you look at the police's statement, which is changed throughout all of this, by the way, they were afraid of engaging with the shooter because of the caliber of weapon he had, 2 AR-15s. if our police, and this is a genuine as genuine as I can possibly be, because people do know that I do support police reform. I support prison reform, all that's good stuff. But if you can't have the police be the one force, the specific force of handling the law, and they can't feel that they can handle a situation where someone has a civilian weapon that is just going to be able to just kill them all, then we have to look at our society and say, what are our priorities? Do we really care about the safety of school kids? Do we really care about the safety of police if we're just going to continue to let civilians have this ability to do that? Now, again, this does come back to the Second Amendment. That Second Amendment is saying that you should be able to fight it back against the government. A tyrannical government, but that is up for interpretation, right? So I'm not saying that you have to just throw out the Second Amendment, but we do have to reevaluate what our society values. Do we value any level of safety? Or should we just rely on the good guy with the gun, which failed in this case? This would have been the prime example of saying, yes, despite this kid having this immense firepower, we could take him out because we had somebody at the place that was an armed guard, which wasn't there according to accounts, and came back, engaged the shooter, did not get him. And the police who didn't engage, and then when they did engage, it took like an hour to get him. So it's I have issues with that too. What an absurd argument by the police. The sidearms they were carrying could easily stop that shooter. They are taking advantage of the general public. I assume the second part of the chat didn't come through yet, but I agree. The general public's ignorance about how any of that works. They know most people think shootings unfold like Call of Duty. Agreed. And this is the part of like, we need to stop living in Hollywood Western shootout style thought process here, and think like, what is it actually like being in an active shooter situation? You honestly, anybody that's my age would be lying if they didn't think about like, oh, when I go into a public spot, what would I do if X, Y, or Z happens? Where are the exits? Because what if this happens? What would I do in those situations? And it's easy to say like, yeah, I'm just gonna like be a complete Chad and like tackle the guy, but realistically, most people in those situations are in shock and they're not going to be able to just be like, yep, boom, go. And it is an argument to say like, even I'm pretty sure that it wasn't just sidearms that the police had anyway, but they had multiple weapons each and could have engaged. Now, again, I don't think we should be having cops in those situations. I don't think we should have these people having to engage with people that have these style weapons. So, how we get rid of them, that is what we have to consider. And if we look at the AR-15 is always the one pointed to. So if that might be the start, then so be it. But we need to look at how these manufacturers are held liable, because currently they're not at all, and how these weapons are used. Eric, you said anything the civil police can obtain a civilian should be able to obtain, which you say that is crazy. Then we agree. The police have access to too much firepower. I agree in demilitarizing the police, right? All I'm saying is if the police, which are engaged to enforce the law, cannot enforce the law because of some random person's firepower, then we are not even living within. We're living in like a fantasy world where we have to expect these people to be like SWAT team to engage everything that could possibly happen. Half the time we have police that are way too overgeared. More than half of the time, they get the military surplus passed down to them for extremely low prices, if not nothing. Our tax dollars fund these things. In response, 2 years ago today, actually, we hosted a Black Lives Matter protest in Doylestown that I helped organize. And in response to it, there were armored vehicles at my high school because of the threat of Antifa coming. So I hear that argument of saying we should be demilitarizing the police, but I do think that there is a time and a place for specialized forces of police to have those certain weapons. I don't think that everyday like cops on the beat should have, walking around with an AR or anything like that. But it is something we have to consider. Sam says, in my view, the root problem with the police response to this incident is the fact that law enforcement has no legal duty to protect citizens according to SCOTUS. It's the response. I'm hesitant to really even engage in those actual critiques beyond like what we know. Because the police, and I hear that with the impact from the Supreme Court, the story from the police in this specific shooting is still unfolding. So that's why I'm still like waiting to be like, okay, this is really what's happened, and this is why the response was so delayed. I mean, it's changed like 15 times. Like, I'm not just making 15 up. Like, it's over a dozen times that the story has changed. So it's a thing that's a good thing to point out. But how we use that information is up for obviously debate. Genuine question: if the lefty ideal world is random folks not having crazy firearms, then what would the role of cops be when a shooting happens? I kind of feel like police need monopoly of force. I.e., the issue is lack of police oversight more so than access to gear that, frankly, they will probably need for the foreseeable future. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say, because if you are trying to say that law enforcement is law enforcement, they should have a monopoly of force as an entity. They also need to be held to account for that monopoly of force. So I'm not engaging in saying like, oh, we should have like all these militia groups. Because that's stupid. Should we be able to defend ourselves on some level? We absolutely have to be able to do that. But we also need to have systems in place to protect our citizens from that monopoly of force. So yes, there is gear required for that. Sean asked, how could you possibly deal with the 20 plus million AR-15s already out there? The first thing would be to stop selling more of them. I get that there's a lot of them out there. 20 million is a lot. The first step would be to stop manufacturing of them. If you were to really if you say you want to get rid of all of them, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. It's just an overwhelming number. But as we can look to our neighbor to the north, we can at least draw some level of inspiration or some level of influence from what is going on there. And that is not to say that we need necessarily mandatory buybacks. I think we start with voluntary buybacks, and then we look at specifics of what has caused these lines of issues, lines of shootings, and what is the common thread. And we've only scratched the surface in addressing the actual gun. So, and I think this is a genuinely good debate and going back and forth, and I hope I'm addressing these questions, because it's not so clear cut that there's no, not to, really be too on the nose, but there is no silver bullet for this issue. I personally am very skeptical that anything will be done this time or any time. If you remember, I had a conversation this past weekend thinking about when you look back, I think it was 4 years ago. I was in college and I was sitting in my house at the time, and I think I was playing Magic the Gathering, right? So yeah, make fun of me all you want, but on the screen the night before on the news was showing the Las Vegas shooting, which we forget that hundreds of people were shot and injured. Dozens, I believe 60, were killed. And the only thing that came of that, and this was during Trump's presidency, so, I mean, I guess credit where credit's due, I guess, but they banned bump stocks. Which, bump stocks were a way to make the gun from semi-automatic to fully automatic. Like, good, those shouldn't be legal. But that was not the specific issue. The shooter had 60 magazines, and that's a lot more common than you can imagine. I understand. Like I said, if you look at the issue of addressing magazine sizes, it's not necessarily to say, like, this will stop X amount of shootings, right? But if you outlaw a certain size, it at least makes it harder to commit these levels of crimes. And look, to even engage in this is just damage reduction. It's just harm reduction at its core, right? Because if we don't address the issues of actually having access to the weapons, then we can't really look at saying, oh, the magazine's the issue, or the size of the magazine's the issue. If we're talking about a wide range of things, because it has to be done in tandem. We have to engage on multiple fronts. Useless ban. I can make my Mini 14 do the same functionality of a bump stock with my belt loop. Yeah. See, like, we all know of, like, certain aspects of things, and, like, look, I'm not a gun owner. I have used them. I'm trained on using them. It's not something that does anything for me personally, but it's trying to engage on some level of saying, yeah, this piece, you shouldn't have that, right? You don't need to have that. Because of the art, like, we're addressing 1,000 different issues with it, but if at the functional baseline level, if we all can agree, or let's say 90% of us can agree, you can have a shotgun or something like that for hunting, or a long rifle for hunting, and you can have something for self-defense, which even that is not exactly universally accepted, frankly, but let's just say for the matter of fact it is. But you can only have certain weapons for that. I think we can come to a common sense solution where you could say, all right, this is the realm of possibilities, and we can work within that framework. The other end of this, on the gun front, before we move on over to addressing some of the issues otherwise, is stating the fact that the NRA, which when I was growing up, and frankly, by the time I started ever using any sort of gun or any sort of training for it, and I went hunting, was still a gun safety, organization. But since I believe the late 90s, and I believe it's Wayne LaPierre. I don't know when he actually became the chair, but since then it's actually been moving further and further towards just being a gun promotion tool. And the NRA is in shambles right now. So beyond just hiring, what's that guy's name? Dan Bongino to do NRA TV and do weird stuff with, like, just promotion of all that and all of their, side projects. At its core, the NRA was originally supposed to be gun safety and teaching people how to use them safely. That mission has changed dramatically and getting absolutely thrown out the window. And another shooting, yes, talking about this issue. People who argue that this is not a pressing issue couldn't be more wrong. I didn't see that, but I guess, it says multiple people killed and suspected gunman is dead after a shooting in Tulsa. Obviously, as we're talking here, so thanks for pointing that out, Sam. It's unfortunate that I can't even go an hour into a show before we see this issue, and CB says, I don't know if I'm just getting blackpilled, but I am moving past the concept of banning actual types of weapons. I believe that the move is probably to look for bipartisan ways to address disarming weirdos. Agreed. But comprehensively, we shouldn't take anything off the table, and especially if we're starting in a negotiation, which sounds funny, but any of these bills is going to start with, here's a Democrats bill, here's a Republicans bill, we have to make something work. If we're going to get anything that's bipartisan passed, which, speak of blackpilled, I don't really think that is very likely to get a significant bill passed on the issue, which is sad. But with the NRA shifting its goals away from safety and towards promotion and just blatant right-wing promotion of guns, that's basically it. You've lost the sense of urgency to teach people the responsibility of having a gun. Because, Uncle Ben said it best, right? With great power comes great responsibility. But if you don't take that responsibility seriously, that's how you get people with kids getting a hold of their guns and committing suicide or having accidents in the house, which, again, those are things that are, I wouldn't say ancillary, but for lack of a better word, like ancillary to the mass shooting problem, because the mass shooting problem is the first thing I think we need to address. And then we can get to addressing these other issues, which we can pivot to right now, but it's all comprehensive. So I hear that criticism and saying that, yeah, maybe not the specific models are what we should be banning, because, we can just, gun manufacturers could just tweak a few things and then boom, you have a different gun. Or, like Eric's talking about, 3D printing of guns, which is its own issue, that could present a lot of different challenges as well. But let's address, while we're here, the other main issue that in the past, it's not so much this time, but in the past, conservatives have put up as their, counter to saying that guns are the problem. And if this is a different situation, it's seemingly so because if you look at the response, as we will in a moment here, the mental health aspect of this is no longer really being waged as the counter narrative to it. And I'll get to the conservative argument or standpoint and show you tweets and responses to it in a second. But mental health is a portion of this. Access to healthcare is a portion of this. And this is where it's disheartening, and it's obviously true that when we engage with those who are vehemently opposed to any of the gun control restrictions or regulations or any of that, and you can say, okay, maybe let's even do it for today, right? For today, let's move this over to the side and just say, all right, we're not necessarily going to do anything on the guns, right? Which I don't agree with, but for the sake of argument. So let's address head on the mental health crisis. I could give you guys this isn't live for everybody, but I could give you guys 5 seconds to say what is the top provider of mental health services in this country, and you would be surprised. I would think many people would be surprised that a vast, I'd say, plurality of people get their mental health services through Medicaid. Not Medicare, not private insurance, Medicaid. So when we talk about access to mental health care, Medicaid is specifically designed for people, a certain percentage, and I would be lying if I said this percentage, but a certain percentage, and I believe it's around 20%, under the poverty line. So you have to be impoverished to have access to this. You have to be really impoverished, frankly, if you're in a family or whatever, to get access to this healthcare. And if you don't have access to the healthcare from Medicaid, Medicare, or private insurance, or if you do but it's not good, then you have these people that never see a therapist, never see a psychiatrist, never see anybody that could possibly address any of these issues, and nip it in the butt and just say, you know what, like, okay, this person, needs to go on this drug or needs to go to this, rehabilitation center or whatever. So if we're really going to say, and I don't think this is the problem, if we're really going to say that mental health care is the issue, or mental health is the issue, then you have to at least advocate that everybody should have access. And I mean access in the sense that free at the point of service health care, including mental health, including, dental, vision, health, hearing, Medicare for all style. All of that needs to be included as a part of addressing this issue and many other issues. I also feel like Dems need to come into the convo understanding deeply that the vast majority of gun owners are safe, responsible, and not bad people. Agreed. Completely agreed. And the pro-Second Amendment need to break out of their bubble. I also completely agree. You need to weigh... Each of us needs to weigh, like, what are we willing to deal with and what are we willing to give up? And it's a balance. I mean, that's what this country is about. But to just dig your heels in and say, like, all right, like, yep, as we're speaking on this show right now, there's another mass shooting. I don't have the details, but another one, and we don't want to do anything in response to it. We don't want to really look at any of the real solutions on the actual problem with the gun. It's tough. So when it comes to, as Sean brought up, the abuse of guns, yeah, that's why you have to, when I was talking about the specifics of being an auditor, you have to be able to address the actual tracing of a gun, the traceability of the gun. So like actually being able to say, like, all right, here's something that is, you can't melt it off, you can't scratch it off, you can't get rid of like the sticker. Obviously there's no stickers on a gun like that, but like, you can't just like weld it off, any of that stuff, right? There has to be a way that you can be able to trace it. And as CB brought up in the earlier part, saying like, okay, we know that they come from certain shops. We know that these certain manufactured weapons designs are used. So if we know what the designs are, we know what the gun makes are, then we should be looking at liability. We should be looking at accountability and saying, okay, someone commits a murder or a violent offense with your weapon. First of all, that weapon needs to be destroyed after used in court. And said, like, all right, well, make sure you get the DNA, make sure you do all that stuff, right? To be thorough. But then that weapon should be taken out and melted down. And that is part of this. And to say, okay, if you're a gun shop and you sell this to somebody that does commit a crime, you should be on some level held liable. Now, what that means, we can discuss that. We can argue about the line. I don't necessarily want guns made of adamantium or vibranium for that matter, but I'm just saying there has to be some way of tracing these weapons that is not just going to be like, yep, like we all know that, like, if you're just saying here's a weapon, the serial numbers on the inside of the barrel, you can easily, somebody that knows their way around a gun, take it apart, get rid of the serial number on it, and it's somewhat untraceable, right? And I know that's I don't know where they put serial numbers on a gun. It's not really my concern on that front, but it's about actually being able to trace them, and that's why the registration is so important. But that's also a thing that wouldn't happen in this country because nobody wants to be put on a registration list, right? So it's not so simple to just say, yep, here it is. Here's the one thing that is the silver bullet to solve it. And look, I'm going to bring up some of the responses to this, and we're going to start with Tommy Laren. if you guys aren't aware of her, we're going to go and check out some of these tweets. So in response to this, and this is why it's important to me to point this out, right? We talk about the guns being the issue. We talk about mental health potentially being a portion of this. And I'll admit to those, right? We look at this tweet and it says, it's not about guns, it's about evil. The Democrats only want it to be about guns. They don't have to address the evil. And I don't know if they just think people are stupid. And we'll get to other responses as well. But there's a common through line this time. The world is not full of people that are good and evil. The world is not black and white. It is not. I get what the point is in saying that, yeah, like someone that's doing this is, evil. Don't rebroadcast this bad faith argument. Can you Eric, can you tell me what's bad faith in saying that it's evil? That it's bad faith in pointing out that these people are saying it's evil. Let's look at, here's Ben Shapiro. The Texas shooter violated a multiplicity of gun laws. The suggestion that more gun laws would have prevented this act of unspeakable evil is unsupported, and the implication that those who oppose such laws are somehow in favor of mass shootings is morally reprehensible. So, again, they're not pointing out any real solutions, not any real parts of the issue of why these mass shootings happen. It's just saying it's evil. It's not bad faith in saying, yeah, look, they're just saying it's evil. It's genuinely not bad faith to say that. Because I can tell you, she's not being genuine. They are all being disingenuous and trying to change. Oh, I thought you were saying I wasn't being genuine. I hear you. They're not being genuine because they don't want any sort of restrictions. They don't want any regulations on this stuff because guess who pays the bills? It's so apparent when you just look at this. And so sorry, I misinterpreted what you were saying, Eric, but it's just they are trying to change the conversation. And yeah, okay, perfect. So like when you just look at this, like they're saying nothing could have stopped this. Not one thing could have stopped this. Look, if there was a responsible gun owner and said like, look, this is what we got to do, boom, 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 I'm all ears. And I think there's plenty of people out there, and there's like we're engaging in tonight, saying like, yeah, we should have universal background checks. And you know what? Maybe those background checks, if you don't get it in 24 hours, you shouldn't just be able to just get the gun. Maybe you shouldn't be able to buy a gun on credit. Maybe you shouldn't be able to just do these basic things that are simple and effective in saying, okay, at least there's a cool off period. Because not every state has these things. We look at states, I've argued this with like my dad, and he's gotten, we've gotten guns in like New Jersey. And in comparison to Pennsylvania, where it's like the Wild West, it's like unbelievably different. So to have any sort of uniformity across the country would be beneficial to help stop these shootings, would be helpful to at least put a damper on some of the impact if they are going to happen. Like if we are at the point where we're just going to accept that shootings like this are going to happen, then, I'm unwilling to accept that. But if other people are going to say that, then at least have some level of damage control and have the audacity to challenge some of these preconceived notions. Just say it's evil, throw our hands up. I mean, it's ridiculous. Tommy Lahren also, and again, I'm bringing these people up because they're influential. Like Tommy Lahren goes on Fox News like every single day, and these are the ones that I saw on there. So you see, there are no laws out there, gun or otherwise, that can prevent tragedy when a series of people fail to do their jobs and drop the ball. So again, if someone like me, a progressive person, criticized the police or Customs and Border Patrol as was at this school, in the same way that these right-wingers are, just saying, you know what, like these guys really screwed up and it's all their fault. If it would be like the biggest thing on news. If, oh my God, like this is like a big deal that, Senator Bernie Sanders said this about, which Bernie Sanders is pretty liberal. And I mean liberal in the not liberal like Democrat, like liberal on guns. Like he's pretty loose on them. Like if any of that stuff happened, it would be the biggest news, like Barack Obama's tan suit. Like it would be that top tier of like what we're actually engaging with in the discourse. It would be like the Dr. Seuss discourse all over again. So Eric said, common CB background check, 2-hour course and a 3-hour conversation with the ATF to get. Oh, okay. I think you were saying with all of that stuff to get the guns that you've had in the past or recently, but that's that take. Let's take a look at this tweet by Ben Shapiro, and we're gonna go to Steven Crowder, a video of that in a second too. And saying common sense gun, this is just for anyone not watching, but common sense gun reform, in quotes, is in reality what the left wrongly believes thoughts and prayers is for the right. An empty phrase denoting I care, but without any actual problem solving content. Not one of the common sense gun reform proposals the leftists proposed would stop shootings like Uvalde. And they know this, and this is still Ben Shapiro. So instead, they make absurd claims suggesting that the mere fact of action of any type will magically reduce shootings. And he mentions Senator Chris Murphy. So Shapiro in this is being completely disingenuous, like yet again. Sorry, yeah, I see that in the chat. I just misread it because you guys are coming through quick. But Shapiro's being completely disingenuous here and saying when people on, broadly, and I get it because I don't think that people on the left exclusively are the ones that get upset with the thoughts and prayers thing. But to compare common sense gun reform as a phrase to thoughts and prayers, where we can actually have a conversation as to what common sense gun reform does versus thoughts and prayers, which literally does nothing. We can actually engage with saying, what is common sense? If 90% of people believe that there should be universal background checks, then we should do it. If I have to get a background check to get a job, if I have to get a background check to get to become a CPA, if I had to get a background check to become a realtor, which all of these things have been a part of my life, then I think it's safe to say that you should get a real background check, maybe potentially by the FBI, which is what I had to do to get a gun. I don't think it's ridiculous to say that. And I think most people that know like what it takes to get a background check, it's really not that hard. I mean, they can do it for you. And if you wanted to be like, oh, like it'd be part of the package of buying a gun, like fine. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to go about it, but this is just totally disingenuous and weak sauce. So we are going to go over, and this is going to be my first time trying this. And this is also going to engage with what Shapiro had said, but I'm going to run this 2-minute clip of Steve Kerr, who's the Golden State Warriors coach. PICS does go through the FBI. The problem is the database. It's not kept up. Fair enough. I just know that for the most part, not every database is connected. So if it's not, like you're saying, if it's not kept up to date, then it's not worthwhile. So we need to actually have databases are only as good as the people who update them. Sure, absolutely. Or the processes that update them automatically. But yes, agreed. We're going to try this. I'm going to mute myself while we play this video. Let me know if it's too loud, too low, because this is the first time, so I can adjust it. But this is Steve Kerr talking last week on the actual shooting and what was occurring as the Golden State Warriors were about to play a basketball game. And we're going to take a look at the response from Ben Shapiro as well to this, because I think it's illuminating a little bit. And I don't think what anything he's saying here is too controversial, but I think it's worthwhile engaging with the clip. So
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot-around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California. And now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check? 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
So there we have that. And in response, we have Mr. Shapiro, who I guess didn't watch the clip or didn't listen to Coach Steve Kerr, who says, I couldn't help but notice that he provides no actual policy recommendation. Wrong. Just the utterly immoral argument that anyone who opposes his unspecified policy recommendation is either corrupt or evil or both. Again with the evil thing, by the way. But let's just pick apart that first part. I mean, he literally cites a bill that is sitting in probably on Mitch McConnell's desk. It is or Chuck Schumer for that matter, but it is up that could be voted on in the Senate. Now, we have a 50-50 split. Let's say we got all 50 Democrats to vote for it. You still have the filibuster. Now, we need to abolish the filibuster, but in the current state of things, you would still need 10 Republicans to switch over, which, like, the bill he's talking about is just a background check bill. We're not talking about anything crazy. So Shapiro is like either, you know, and also like, I'm just going to address the fact that this is not his normal picture. They're having this stupid, dumb, illogical argument and movie, I guess, that the Daily Wire is producing, because the Daily Wire is really good quality. But that's why it's a stupid picture. But it's just really disingenuous and disgusting, frankly, to just take what a basketball coach says and then just be like blatantly disregard it. And I will also give props. I believe it's the San Francisco Giants manager who is sitting out on the national anthem until something is done on this issue as well. And he paused it on Memorial Day to, say like thank you to the people that made the ultimate sacrifice and passed away serving our country. But he's doing it again, and that's good. Like these people that, as CB brought up too, saying like big props to this guy, saying celebrities, whether they be athletes, movie stars, just general musicians that aren't necessarily political in nature, when they get political, they get criticized, more so when they're usually liberal. The right really loves to cradle and massage the heads of of right-wing celebrities like Kid Rock or Ted Nugent or Clint Eastwood. All these, mediocre on some level celebrities, which is like cool. But yeah, this is what we need. We do need people like this speaking out. We do need people to continue to show up and keep fighting for our collective safety, collective rights, etc. And now I'm moving over here to this is cited over here by Media Matters, and it's about Steven Crowder from last week as well, talking about the shooting and talking about the impact of the shooting and the decision to homeschool kids or to try to undercut public schooling, because that's the real problem here. So we can take a little listen here.
Yes,
and you know what? We have evil at play right now. I think that's what we need to acknowledge. There is evil in this world. It will always be amongst you. And you know what? I think that our public schools are a breeding ground for evil. I'll say that. I really do. Mm-hmm. I really do. When you look at you can't just silo everything. When you look at the conversations, when you look at trying to uninvolve and detach the parents from these children's lives, when you're looking at transitioning children, when you're looking at browbeating young white boys for something they've never done, look, I think that it's a breeding ground for evil. Okay? I think it's long before you get to the point of a bunch of policies that won't work on an inanimate object. Let's understand human nature, and that's if you're a conservative or a liberal. Dennis Prager talks about that. Do you believe that human beings are all inherently good or all inherently evil? Let's remove the term evil because some of you agnostics are uncomfortable with it. Okay, selfish. All that's required for someone to be a sociopath or a narcissist is just to only think of themselves, is to be selfish. We often think that they have to go out and they're pulling wings off dragonflies. No. You just have to be selfish. That's how it starts.
Well, I believe it was the 50s when there was a lot more God-fearing than there is now, that they asked a group of people if they would hurt another person to save themselves. And it was like 65% of them said yes. So think about what that number's probably raised to today.
It's like 100.
Yeah, it's got to be, 99.9?
Would you hurt
certainly
another
in this
person?
studio?
Yes, they answer too quickly. No. It's just save I don't care. I would hurt the other person.
You know this poll is public, sir.
Yes.
I don't care.
We have video of you.
Can you tell my neighbor that I said this? Maybe he'll start trimming his hedges.
His name's John.
Yeah.
You keep stealing my packages.
Keep waxing your boat, but not cutting your lawn, John.
Yeah, and stop screwing with my mail. It's a federal offense.
Yes.
And you know what?
So there you have that as well, which if that wasn't illustrative enough of what the right is thinking here. So let's just dissect all these pieces, right? So we're going to start with the public schools are a breeding ground for evil. Get the F out of here with that crap. They want to undercut public schools because they don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to pay taxes because they're millionaires and they're paid off by billionaires to do what they do to spread propaganda. So someone like Crowder, who's sitting there with a pistol on his, which I don't know that that's a real pistol, frankly, but he sits there with a pistol on his desk and a little holster on there because he feels like a big man and he wants to compensate for whatever he's lacking, let's just say. He goes through all this and says like, oh, it's evil at play in the public schools and we need to, undercut the funding because they're having, kids transition, which has nothing to do with this issue, has nothing to do one connecting to the other, and frankly is just a fixation of the right. Always. This guy can't go a week of shows without trying to dress in drag to try and make fun of people dressed in drag or trans women, and just this guy is just a complete piece of shit, frankly. And for them to talk about being selfish is considered narcissistic or egotistical, or I mean sociopathic, I think is the right thing that he's saying. You are literally the biggest advocate for the self-interest, pull yourself up by your bootstraps theory of change in this country and in this world. So don't give me that bullshit and saying, actually, it's selfishness that is the problem, while you advocate for the only way someone is going to make it in your theoretical world is through selfishness. And then they talk about God-fearing being a part of this. It has nothing to do with God-fearing. It has nothing to do with the nuclear family, which they want to bring up. And they just want to be like, it's about no fathers being there, which has, I'm at a loss for words to even describe like what the logic is there. Because there's no fathers, you have people that feel okay shooting people. Because there's fewer religious people, they're just going to go shoot people. Crime overall, and violent crime, until most recently with the pandemic, so I will put the caveat there. Violent crime has been in a steady decline since the 1990s. And frankly, it peaked then, but it was not too crazy going up for a while there either. So in the 90s through 2020, you saw this giant drop into historic low rates of crime, and specifically violent crime. And the usage of weapons of this caliber was only rising for mass shootings. So to say like, oh, it's fatherlessness or it's the disintegration of the nuclear family, it's less God-fearing, is just a complete disregard of what the actual situation. And CB says it also ignores the fact that public schools are typically the only way that troubled kids have access to any help, psych help, safety from home life, and food, which is a good point. That is vital information in knowing that public schools are how we get socialized. And I know this is a completely different topic for tonight, but just hear me out. If you can't go to school and you can't, I'm not saying you have to love school. You don't have to be like in love with being around all these people, but it actually is used to socialize you and teach you how to be part of community and be part of society and take orders from people, take lessons from people, learn, become a student, become someone that can absorb things and engage in a productive society. So for them to say, oh, you should just go get homeschooled, the Federalist said the same thing, the Federalist being a right-wing think tank funded, it ignores the completely necessary function of what public schools provide. And like you pointed out, food and protection from home life alone are physical needs that some kids need. And then we tie it back into the mental health aspect of saying they need psych help. Guidance counselors at schools, which there needs to be significantly more guidance counselors per school, as there should be fewer students per guidance counselor assigned. But a guidance counselor might be the only person someone can talk to. A teacher. When I was in high school and I struggled with things, I would talk to a teacher. They didn't have to talk to me. I didn't have a therapist. I didn't have anything like that. But I would talk to a teacher or my coach, who also happened to be a teacher. So to lump in this like weird hatred of public schools is pretty telling. It's they're grasping at straws. And it's because this sicko makes money off of acting like he's this big tough guy. And he, if you're this big tough guy, you probably wouldn't need a gun for the most part. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, like, you could just go fight. It's like you are acting like you're this macho man Rambo guy. You're not. You're just a clown. You were on Arthur. Good for you. Who cares? So this is where this whole argument is going. I don't know what's happening with this most recent shooting that happened while we're on here. But this discussion is not going away. the concept of gun control might change. The focus points might change, because I can guarantee you it's not the exact same situation in this shooting, but it never is the exact same thing. It feels like we've just been in a perpetual cycle of the same thing here. And, to close out for this show, I have to remain positive in the sense that, like, this is what we choose to do. This is what we're engaging in. This is American society. We can't just, like, cede it. But there has to come a time where we can really come together, reckon with the issues and our shortcomings as a nation, at a bare minimum as a local community, and address these underlying issues and the the low-hanging fruit, which I think is these, as Ben Shapiro would make fun of me for, the common sense gun reforms. There seems to be a lot of differences. Might be trying to be optimistic this time. But I remember where I was when I saw, Sandy Hook. And I remember when I saw what happened in Florida with those kids. I'm drawing a blank on where they're from. But I remember where I was when I found out about the shootings. I remember being at the YMCA in Doylestown when I saw what happened to Sandy Hook, and looking at the TV, and I go, what the hell is going on here? Like, I remember going back to the bench press and being like, talking to my lifting partner, who we would argue about this stuff. Be like, how do you justify any of this? How do you Parkland, thank you, Eric. How do you deal with the stress of, like, knowing that we could change something like this? I don't have kids yet, and if I ever have kids, like, that's going to be something that we have to teach. I'm young enough that I never went to school without practicing lockdown drills. I never had a day of school where we didn't have to worry about that. And from a multitude of angles, because I was in kindergarten when 9/11 happened. So my whole life has been in this lockdown security state of, like, we can't address any of these real issues. We're not going to look at all that. We're just going to be like, yep, stay put. Good luck. Something has to give. I'll close in tonight before plugging everything and saying, stay tuned. Look at my Twitter in the upcoming days and weeks. I believe we're going to be doing it on June 25th in Doylestown. We're going to be doing a letter writing campaign to Bucks County elected officials, specifically at the state house and the state senate level, to address the going gun reform. And you can write your own letter, you can do whatever you like. We're going to be working on taking donations, and hopefully my PAC will be able to just provide for everything. And we're going to do it at Koru Real Wellness, which is a friend of the show, Colin. He wanted to take actions on this, and maybe I'm premature in announcing it, but you just keep an eye out on my social media, because this is important. It might not be like the one thing that changes somebody's mind, but it's something productive, it's something tangible, and it's something positive. And at the bare minimum, you can come around, meet people, and connect on some human level and say, we are together in this. We are fighting together for a better tomorrow, and dare I say, a greater society, stealing the joke from Eric in the chat earlier. But that is what our goal is in doing this. This is why I do this show. This is why I advocate and do this stuff for the local Democratic Party. We even when we feel like we have nothing left to give, even when we feel like this is it, and or as our the terminally online folks that we all are, if we are black-pilled on an issue, we have to get up and keep going, even if it's just to hit a brick wall again. There's really no alternative to that. So June 25th, at a bare minimum, you can come and meet like-minded people, connect, engage, ask questions, whether it's of me, of other people. Just I'm going to work on getting an elected official there at least. So I'm all ears for suggestions. If you want to contribute to the effort, monetarily or just showing up, let me know. I'll tell you how to get in contact, and I'll give you my PAC information for that as well. So with that being said, if you guys enjoy this show live or after, and by the way, I apologize for the audio. Last time hasn't been completely updated yet, and will be up and running tomorrow with this episode. So anybody that is listening to audio only, you're getting a double feature. But if you enjoyed the show, it would really mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to the channel. So hit the subscribe button right down below my face if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the bell button and the like button. So the bell button will give you notifications when we go live or when we clip a piece of the show and put that on the channel as well. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Connor OHanlon. The show is on Instagram and on Facebook. Just look up Greater Society Media. That is the company that the show is under. And if you really, really love me and you love the show, you can go over to patreon.com and support the show for as little as $5 a month to help me pay for the wonderful graphics and support that my friend Josh helps me with. And that would just be a great way to support the show. And if you can't do all of that, you can at least share the show on social media, because that would be a-okay by me. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for hanging out, whether you're in chat, you're listening, or you're watching a rerun of the show. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to joining you again next week. If you have something that you would like me to address on a future episode or a guest, you can email the show at greatersocietymedia@gmail.com, or just shoot me a DM somewhere or text me if you have my phone number. So with all that being said, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you next week. So take care.